Mary Tudor was the first acknowledged Queen of England. Throughout her life, Mary encountered many challenges as a Catholic and as the first ruler in a world of Protestant men. However, given these struggles, she was able to explore her options and find her niche in the politics of England. Since she was constantly in public eye, information was exchanged throughout her kingdom about her. In the beginning, it was all predominantly positive, but the gossip exchanged rapidly became gruesome as she earned her more well-known nickname, Bloody Mary. July 19th, 1553. Mary took the throne after her younger brother, Edward VII, died due to illness. However, instead of abiding by his father's wishes, he excluded his sisters, Mary and Elizabeth, from being successors to the throne. Aside from the fact that Mary was Catholic, the three of them did not have a strong relationship due to the fact that they were not raised together. The strained relationship between the siblings can be blamed on their father, Henry VIII's infidelity. The end result was Edward choosing Lady Jane Grey as his successor.
And it kind of comes back to belief. So you have Edward, who was raised and was really truly Protestant. If you look at the end of Henry VIII's life, he gets a little bit nervous that maybe he made a mistake. So when he was on his deathbed, even though he's supposed to be Protestant, he called for a priest to come and to give him last rites, just to kind of cover all of his bases. But Edward had none of those ambivalences. He was Protestant and he was confident. And so choosing Lady Jane Grey was a way to continue Protestantism rather than reverting back into Catholicism, which he saw as flawed. It was a broken church.
In the royal Tudor household, the siblings carried resentment towards one another. It was to the point that Edward didn't see either of his sisters worthy to wear the crown and lead their people. Even though Lady Jane Grey was favored by Edward, the country longed for a Tudor once more, giving Mary a chance to explore a new role for women. Her journey to power wasn't easy. Mary encountered struggles beginning around the age of 11. Her father longed for a male heir, and when it had become apparent that her mother, Catherine of Aragon, was unlikely to produce a son, her father began to look for a way to end his nearly 20-year marriage. This eventually led to an annulment of the marriage, and Henry VIII creating the Church of England. This meant that Mary faced more struggles than a child should. Immediately after the divorce of her parents, Mary was labeled as a bastard child, leaving her emotionally scarred for life. Her refusal to convert from Catholicism caused Mary's relationship with her father to weaken, even more than it was. By the time Mary took the throne, however, England was divided. With the majority of people leaning toward the Protestant faith, Mary again stood by her religion, Catholicism. Eventually, she encountered problems between her and her people. Protestant rebellions led by the politician Sir Thomas Wyatt caused her to explore bloody retaliation. In 1554, Queen Mary I established a law stating that England was a Catholic country, and anyone who dared to defy her would be put to death. This led to the burning and killing of nearly 300 Protestants, thus earning her the nickname of Bloody Mary.
What people believe fundamentally matters, and people will die for beliefs sometimes more readily than they will for any other reason.
Within the next few months, gossip was exchanged throughout the country about Mary's bloody ways. Later that year, she encountered more controversy when she married the Catholic King Philip of Spain.
So there are a certain set of problems that queens always face, and that is the problem of a husband. And the problem in particular that Mary faced was that she married a foreigner, Philip of Spain, who was a Catholic, and Mary herself was a Catholic, and there's a sense of fear and suspicion of having an outside power have influence over England and influence over the crown, and I think that this made her less popular than she might have otherwise been on her own. And the other problem, of course, that she faced is the shift in religion from Protestantism to Catholicism. She's an ardent Catholic. Many Protestants are burned. They're persecuted as heretics under her. They're burned at the stake. And this does no favors for her popularity and creates a climate of fear in an age where you actually had to have popular support to be a successful ruling monarch.
Given that the people of England were already leaning toward Protestant beliefs, Catholicism was viewed with suspicion. Marrying Philip was an added reason for Protestants to explore open rebellion. However, Mary was also exploring unfamiliar territory as a woman. She had assumed that marriage would secure Catholicism within England. This proved to be a mistake. In the end, it just caused more hardships that she would have to overcome. Mary encountered issues with fertility and illness as well. Her main problem was stomach pain, which she often confused with pregnancy. Eventually, people stopped believing the pregnancy she claimed had occurred. Now it is known that she was most likely suffering from stomach cancer, and the pregnancies were just stomach tumors. As Mary neared her death without any sort of heir, she decided that her Protestant sister Elizabeth should assume the throne in order to keep the family line intact. However, the two half-sisters did not get along.
I think it was a very rivalrous situation. They all had different mothers. There were different factions of nobility interested in the succession. The Protestants, of course, wanted Edward to succeed the throne. And even though Mary was the oldest, she wasn't necessarily the obvious candidate, right? And in many respects, again, because there were different mothers, this was a very tense situation, and there wasn't a lot of cohesion and support as you might have had in a traditional family setting.
Mary died on November 17, 1558, due to complications from influenza. She was then buried nearly a month later on December 14, 1558, at Westminster Abbey. Because Mary explored a new position for women, it became possible for her sister Elizabeth to have a prosperous reign. The difference between Mary and Elizabeth is that Elizabeth had a role model to learn from. Mary, on the other hand, did not. Elizabeth was able to see her sister's mistakes and their effects on England. For example, Mary didn't take advice from her advisors, and that led to the division of herself and Parliament, whereas Elizabeth willingly listened and solved issues with Parliament's opinion in mind.
When Mary came to the throne, I think she was pretty competent. And I think that was true with Elizabeth as well, that both of them had a pretty good sense of how to kind of work the political system and all of these older men who are trying to manipulate them. And neither Mary nor Elizabeth were easy to manipulate. I think they were both pretty strong-willed. They had a strong sense of what they wanted. And look, their father was, in many ways one of the best kings that England ever had. And I think, he raised his daughters to rule, right? So they know how to kind of operate in this political world.
As a result, it was possible for Elizabeth to be more well-equipped to rule and eventually become one of the most beloved queens in all of England's history. If Elizabeth had not seen her older sister's misadventures in ruling, she herself might have made some of the same errors. Furthermore, all the problems Mary encountered ended up guiding Elizabeth. Elizabeth stood in silence, witnessing firsthand Mary's mistakes. However, Mary had tried to do good for her people.
Mary was not very well. She was sick for a lot of her reign, and so she didn't have a long time to exactly establish herself. And so in terms of what she was trying to accomplish, she really wanted to bring back the ritual of the church. She wanted to bring back the sacraments of the church. She wanted to restore the ties to Rome and to the other strong Catholic countries. So she wanted to bring back the ritual and the order of a Catholic Mass and the authority, the hierarchy of it.
Once Elizabeth was queen, she encountered issues comparable to those of Mary's, but handled them differently. Both sisters had to sentence people to death. Mary was ruthless when it came to murdering anyone who crossed her. However, Elizabeth decided to deliver the death of criminals in a more diplomatic fashion. Elizabeth could have been considered as ruthless as her sister, but she learned from Mary's vengeance. She was willing to make tough decisions, but she didn't let it define her. If she hadn't seen Catholics slaughter Protestants, and vice versa, she might have made the practice of Catholicism illegal, the way Mary had made Protestantism illegal. Therefore, the citizens of England might not have loved Elizabeth the way they did. In exchange for Mary's failure, future generations grew to dislike Catholics due to the violence associated with them. After seeing firsthand the effects of a Catholic queen, they were reluctant to go back, leaving the door wide open for Elizabeth. Mary explored an unfamiliar position in life for women of the time, encountered political and religious issues, and in exchange for Mary's failure to make England a Catholic country, Elizabeth was able to successfully rule for many years to come. While Mary Tudor might have done some horrible deeds during her reign, she wasn't the bloodiest leader in England's history, nor was she the best. In fact, she was just a queen who loved her country and tried to help her people in the best way she saw possible. And to her, that was Catholicism.